guys hear me clearly? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Um, if it is not so difficult, yeah, for those of you who are, if you're connected to a Wi-Fi, I'd really appreciate if, I don't know, maybe you're already on your bed, but if not, I would appreciate to see you if you could open your video so I can see you, you know. It's good to, but if you're not comfortable, it's all right. It's okay with me. Okay? Thank you for that wonderful song. I love it. Um, I'd like to. I prayed about this time, and I felt like God spoke to me to talk about this particular I- topic: what to do in time of need. I don't know about in America, but here in Myanmar, 2020 it's been very difficult for us as well. Um, for me personally, it's also difficult. Um, as a family, it's difficult when I look to my kids doing their classes here at home. Uh, always have to spend time with the screen, you know, with the laptops and the computers. It's been very difficult for them as well. And in terms of finances, it's difficult to. I don't know about you guys over there, but here it's been very difficult. And when I was praying, what should I share for this time? I felt like God spoke to me about this topic: what to do in time of need. One thing is for sure, we all go through the difficulties or trials in different shapes and form. Okay, one way or another, we are all facing a difficulty, and while we don't want to face anything difficult or unpleasant, the Lord allows them because He has a plan, and He uses this kind of situation to shape us, to change us, to um, put in us His, plant within us His nature, His character. And so, yeah, let me speak about this topic: what to do in time of need. I want us to look to Second Kings chapter 4. I'm sure you'll be very familiar with this. It's about a certain woman with two sons, and all she had is a jar of oil. I think all of you will be familiar with this. If it is not too much to ask, can we all read verses 1 to 7? Second Kings chapter 4, verses 1 to 7.
One day, the widow of a member of the group of prophets came to Elisha and cried out, "My husband who served you is dead, and you know how he feared the Lord. But now a creditor has come, threatening to take my two sons as slaves. What can I do to help you?" Elisha asked. "Tell me, what do you have in the house?" "Nothing at all, except a flask of olive oil," she replied. And Elisha said, "Borrow as many empty jars as you can from your friends and neighbors. Then go into your house with your sons and shut the door behind you. Pour olive oil from your flask into
Mm,
the jars, setting each one aside when it is filled." She did as she was told. Her sons kept bringing jars to her, and she filled one after another. Soon every container was full of the brim, full to the brim. "Bring me another jar," she said to one of her sons. "They aren't any more," he told her, and then the olive oil stopped flowing. When she told the man of God what had happened, he said to her, "Now sell the olive oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on what is left over."
thank you, thank you. How many of you have read this story? Anybody?
No.
Not yet? Okay, okay. Okay, so I have to do a good job because this is your first time hearing this story. Anyway, please, also Sansan already, somebody raised the hand. Okay, at least one of you have read this story. Anyway, um, put your marker on that page so that you can look back to this and maybe read again when you're during your free time or your devotion time. And I know that God would make things clear, even make things even clearer to you. Anyway, the story is quite simple. There's a woman. She had two sons. Her husband died, and the family had this huge debt that they had to pay, but they didn't have any resources. They didn't have enough resources to pay. So it sounds quite difficult. Nothing more, nothing is more difficult than this situation for me, I would say. This woman lost her husband. Most of you are single. Um, it's I don't know how would you guys imagine this, but just to think that her husband died is unthinkable. Actually, it's difficult. That in itself is hard. And now she could also lose her sons because she didn't have enough resources to pay back their debts. And then, as we all can see, the husband is gone, and so that man cannot help them as well. Hopeless, discouraging situation. And I'm sure this woman, she's worried, she's stressed out, she's feeling hopeless. I'm sure you would agree with me that if we could put our feet on her shoes, that would have been such a very difficult time. Not only they have this huge debt, but her husband just died. She's emotionally wrecked. She is emotionally broken. And then now there's this creditor that's coming, threatening to take her two sons. What is more worse than that? And when I think of year 2020, it I can I could somehow say that it's quite similar to what this woman is saying. I mean, we didn't we did yes, we didn't lose a loved one or a spouse, or there's no threat to trying to take our children. We're not, perhaps you're not emotionally wrecked, but I mean, in different ways and forms, we are actually going through a difficult situation as well. Now, COVID-19 cases in Myanmar is still on the rise. I think um, 1,000 new cases at least every day. So I don't know how many now. I'm not. I lost count of it, but it's still very difficult here. Um, and so I just felt like this story would somehow encourage each one of us. What do we do in time of need? What do we do? Now I want to share with you guys keys, keys to finding God's help. Because just like with this woman, with left with a jar of oil, God was able to move in such a mighty way in her life and in the life of her sons. And I believe that if we would somehow learn the lessons that this story shows us, I believe we will also see the same thing, that God would be able to show His mighty hand upon our lives as well. So let me go through this very quickly. Number one of the keys that we would find in the story so that we would see God's help in our lives is this. This woman, she looked to God. She seek God. She inquired of God. If you would read verse 1 again, it says there, a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elijah. When she was in this difficult situation, the first thing she did was she went to Elisha, the man of God, the prophet of God, and she cried out. She cried out. She poured out her heart. She talked about how her husband died, and now she's in debt. They have this huge debt, and now there's this big problem, that to the extent that her sons could be taken away from her. she she went to this man of God, Elisha, and she cried out before him. And basically, what she's doing is she's looking for God's help through the prophet Elisha. Back then, God usually spoke through the prophets. So if you want to, speak to God, or you want to hear from God, the Jewish people back in the Old Testament, they would look for a prophet, a man of God. So that's what she did. She didn't look for people as her first choice, which is, if you would agree, which is something that we tend to do often, right? When we face a difficulty, normally we would look for people, or tell our friends, tell our parents, or so on and so forth. But this woman, when she was facing this difficulty, she went to the man of God, Elisha, and she poured out her heart. She was looking for direction, she was looking for help. Now, when we are in trouble, how often do we look to God for help? Is God our first choice for help, or is He our last resort? So that's the questions that we also want to be able to reflect. How often do we look to God? So that's the first thing. If we want to see the hand of God move and help us in time of need, number one, we have to look to God. God should be our default mode. Lord, what do you have to say about this difficulty? Lord, what are you teaching me? Lord, what do you want to say to me during this time? Lord, what can I do to fix the situation? Is there anything that you want to bring to my attention, Lord? That's why you have allowed this difficulty. And I believe one of the reasons why COVID-19 is really, you know, uh, if I can say this, really spread throughout the world, I think it's because God is trying to do something. God is trying to take our attention once again. God is trying to speak. And so, in a difficult time like this, we want to look back to Him and ask Him, God, what do you want to say? What are you teaching me? What are you trying to bring to my attention? When we look to David, who is known as the man after God's own heart, David knew this secret. David knew how it is to call on God. David said in Psalm 16 verse 6, Psalms 18 verse 6, he said, "In my distress I called upon the Lord and cried out to my God." You know, the in the world, people crying seem to be a sign of weakness, You know, it doesn't look like it's a sign of strength when you cry. But in the Bible, many of the people and the women and the men of God that God used and God encountered with, they had this moment where they had to cry. When was the last time you cried? When was the last time you actually were down on your knees and crying out to God for help? He said, "In my distress, I call upon the Lord." He didn't call upon the king. He didn't call upon his friends. He didn't call upon anybody else. He said, "I cried out to my God." He heard my voice from his temple, and my cry came before him, even to his ears. God can hear our cry. I'm happy with that. I like that idea that when I'm in a difficult time, when I'm facing a trial, as soon as I cry out to God, God can hear me. And that's so encouraging, because sometimes when we are facing a difficulty and you tell it to your friends, sometimes they're not listening. I don't know about you. Have you experienced that? Like people would be there in front of you, but they're not actually listening. They're maybe nodding their head and saying, "Okay, okay, all right," but they might not be really paying that much of an attention. But God is not like that. He's not like men. When you cry out to Him, He listens. He pay attention to what is it that you're facing. Now, we want to be like David, one that would look to God in time of need. And so as we cry out to God, the encouragement is God will answer us. And so we want to look to God. We want to seek Him in a difficult time, just like this. Jeremiah, I like this verse, Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 11 to 13. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. I hope so. For I know the thoughts I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. And then verse 12, I like this promise. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you. Look at that. You will call upon me, you will come to me, you will pray to me, and I will listen to you. This is God's promise to us. You will seek me and find me. And so as we seek the Lord, as we look to God, it's guaranteed that we will find him. If we seek the Lord with all our heart, it says that when you search for me with all your heart, you will find me. And so going back to the story of the woman, I think that's exactly what was going on in her heart. She was seeking God with all her heart, crying out to the prophet of God, Elisha, what must I do? What should I do? I'm in a difficult time. And so that's the first key. If we want to see the hand of God move in time of need like never before, we need to learn to look to him and seek him. He should be our first option, our default mode, not our last resort. Amen. Number two, I hope you are still there. I don't know how late is it there, but please stay with me, okay? Number two, I want us to look to verse 2 again. The Bible says, so Elisha said to her, as she cried out, look at this, as she cried out to the prophet replied. In other words, God was willing to speak back to her. The prophet said, what shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in your house? What do you have in your house? And she said, your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil. She didn't have much, but she had something. She didn't have everything, but she had something. And so that is a good news. Many of us don't have everything that we hope to have, we wish to have, but we do have something that God has already given us. And so that would be my next point. If we want to see the hand of God move in time of need in each of our lives, number two, look to what God has already given you. Have you ever thought of that? And I'm sure, all of you there in the US, God has given you so much, whether you believe it or not. Okay? Maybe when you compare your lives to your friends, you know, maybe they have better things, this and that compared to you. But let me tell you, you already have a lot from God. God has given you a lot, or He has already blessed you with something. You might feel like it's nothing, but it is something that God has already placed in your hand. Now, oftentimes, God has given us the answer to our problems. We spend a lot of times wondering, Lord, how can I face this situation when in fact God has already given us the solution for that problem. Look at this woman. She thought she didn't have anything, but actually that jar of oil, that little oil that she had, would be the very solution that God would use to bring the miracle. Think about that. Maybe the small thing that you have, the small thing that you thought, it's not really that important, it's not really, it really doesn't matter. Maybe that's the very thing that God would use to bring His miracle in your life. She said, I have nothing. She called that little thing that she had nothing. And sometimes we also feel the same way. You know, we call um, precious things like nothing. If you have a family, that's a big thing. If you have health, that's a big thing. If you can breathe properly and you're not in the hospital, you don't need an oxygen attached to you, that's a big thing. But sometimes we are so familiar with the good situation that we are in, and we take for granted if the good things that God has given us, and we think that they're just normal, it's just ordinary, but they're actually big. And so she said, I have nothing but a jar of oil. She never thought that a jar of oil could be the key to finding God's miracle in her life. God has given each one of us something that God can use as answers or solutions to our needs. God has given us abilities, giftings, unique personalities. You know, I heard about this story. How many of you watch football? I mean, not American football. I mean the soccer. You know, like Premier League, or I'm sure Joseph would like that. One of the things you would notice is the field. The field is well maintained, right? It's really clean and green, and all the grass are leveled. And I heard about this story that the people that maintain this field, the grass, the people that cut the grass, do you know that they earn millions of dollars by simply cutting the grass? They earn millions of dollars if you know how to cut this grass very well. Joseph, you want to try? This is a good business. This is a good job. you know, when I heard about this, I'm really shocked because when I see somebody cutting grass, come on, I mean, it doesn't look it doesn't look promising. I mean, I don't think somebody can make such a living out of cutting grass. But in the UK, if you put up a company and you can maintain this huge stadium and cut the grass for the players and prepare them before the game, come on, you can earn millions and millions of dollars just by doing this. You see, sometimes we ignore little things like that, cutting grass. Come on, if you have a if you have good grass around your house, that would be a good place to try. But just to think about that, maybe there are things in our lives that we ignore and say, well, you know it's not really that big of a deal. It's not really something that I can say, such a gift that God can use. When I think of this, a man gifted in cutting grass could make millions of dollars and live such a great life, such a wonderful living, simply because he knows how to cut the grass. God has given you something. Don't ignore it. Don't put it down. Don't say that it's not as good as what my friends have. My talent is not as great as other people have. No, don't ignore it. Use it. You might feel like all I can do is to cut grass. You have no idea what cutting grass can bring to your life. No, I'm not saying to literally cut grass and change your job. Okay, no, please don't. I'm just using this as an example that how often do we ignore the seemingly little things that God has already given us, simply because we don't appreciate their value or its value. Maybe God has given you a good voice or a gift of music. I'm sure some of you can sing better than I do, right? You can use it. God has given you that gift for a purpose. Use it. Maybe you cannot sing. Don't worry, you can cry. No, no, I'm just kidding. You don't have to cry. If you cannot sing, maybe God has given you a skillful hands. Maybe you can draw. Maybe you can paint. Some people that can sing, their hands are pretty much, sorry to say this, but their hands are pretty much useless. They can't do anything else but sing. But you know, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can sing, it's okay. But if you can't, maybe try your hands. Maybe your hands can. Like my daughter, I mean, you give her some paint and paper and a canvas, she can paint very well. I mean, you give me a canvas, nothing. I can't do anything with it. I can produce any meaningful pictures or painting out of it 5 hours later, right? I'm not gifted with that. But you give me an instrument, then I can do something with it, right? What is it that God has given you? Now you might say, Pastor Fred, I can't sing, also I can't draw, but maybe God has given you an intellect, a smart brain, right? And you need a smart brain to write a book, or maybe God can use your brain to invent something, right? We still, there's still a lot of needs in this world, and we need a lot of inventors, right? Um, Maybe you might say, well, my brain is not so good. Never mind. Maybe God has given you a good heart. A good, at least a good heart. A good heart, God can use a good heart to do something for people, right? You can share your food to them. You can say good things to them. You can encourage them. The God has given you something. Okay, no matter how hard you try to say, well, I just can't find what it is that God has given me. No, maybe it's a good heart, or maybe it's a good smile, right? Maybe it's a good hair. I don't know, but God has given you something, okay? Or maybe a job. Okay, those of you who have a job or a part-time job, that's a good thing. God can use that. When you look to the Bible, um, people like Nehemiah, Daniel, these people, they God used them through their job. And so if you have a job or a career, God can use that, right? Don't wish, oh, how I wish I am so and so. I can be on the pulpit and preaching and teaching. Maybe that's not your gift, right? Maybe your gift is outside the church, and there's nothing wrong with that. So what is it that God has given you that could be the solution or the answers to your problem? And so never despise what God has given you. Now you might say, well, Pastor Fred, with all the things you mentioned, I just can't relate to it. I just have no I have no gift. Okay. Maybe God has given you money. Just ask your parents money. God can use money, right? Bring that money to the church or to wherever God leads you, right? Or if you see the homeless outside, if you have a money, you can buy them burgers or ice cream, or buy them something, a clothing, right? God has given us something that God can use for whatever it is that He wants to accomplish. Now, if you are in a time of need, look to your own hand. For the in the case of this woman, she had to go back to her house. Look back, Go back to her house and look around to find out what is it that she's been ignoring that God could actually use to bring the miracle. So think about that thoughts. Okay? Look to God, seek God. Secondly, look to what God has already given you. Now, the third point is this. If you want to see the hand of God move in our lives in a time of need, number three, follow God's instruction. I hope you're still following with me. I hope you're still here. Verse 3, um, it says, Then he said, Go, borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not gather a few. And when you have come in, you shut the door behind you and your sons. Then pour it into all those vessels and set aside, the full ones. When I was thinking of this, God really sometimes speaks to us in mysterious ways. This woman, she only had a jar of oil left, and the instructions that the prophet of God gave her is quite interesting. I want you to go to your neighbors and borrow empty vessels. For what? I was thinking of this. For what? She doesn't have much oil to put in those vessels. Why borrow vessels, right? What's the point of it? And then not only few, he said, don't just get a few, get as much as you can. And when I was thinking of this, what's the point of it, Lord? Just to have empty vessels, it's useless. To have empty vessels is as useless of a situation as can be, because you can't really profit much with vessels. You need oil. Oil is precious. Oil is something that they can sell back then, but vessels, it's not really that much of a uh, value. And so God is able to help us, but we must obey Him fully when He gives us instruction. When we are in a time of need, that's the time when God is speaking to us. And so when He speaks, we want to make sure that we obey. When God speaks to us, we are to fully follow, especially when His instructions do not make sense at all. Go borrow vessels from everywhere. Empty vessels, and don't just get a few. What is the point of that? What is the point of getting vessels when you have nothing to put in? She was told, do not just gather a few. And then, not only that, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons. Once you've collected all these vessels, I want you to close the door, shut your house down, and make sure that nobody would come in, nobody would go out. And I think God gave them that instruction so that to make sure that the miracle that is about to happen will not come from any other source. When the once that house is shut, there's no way somebody else can come in and give them oil. There's no way that you know any other source can come in and provide for them. It must be the miracle of God. It must be done by the hand of God. And so the instructions that God gave them seem like it doesn't make sense, but this woman had to learn to follow God's instruction. When we go back to verse 5, it says, when she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it. Once she obeyed, now I want to highlight that obedience is the key here. You know, so when we obey, God had no choice but to move. When a Christian obeys God, then we put God in a position where he had no choice but to move. When we disobey, he will also move, but it will be a different kind of move. But when we obey, then his blessings can flow. So this woman shut the door with her sons inside the house. They brought all the vessels in, and then she started pouring the last jar of oil that she had. The jar of oil that she had left, she poured it out. She didn't keep it, she poured it out. God didn't give her oil from heaven. No, God multiplied the oil that she had left. She was willing to pour that oil away. And I think I think that's a wonderful lesson for us to learn, to follow whatever it is that God is speaking to us in a difficult time, just like with her. And as we obey, we will see the hand of God. Pour it out. Pour it out. All she had to do is to pour it out. Just pour that oil that she had left. Just pour it. Pour it. Now, how can we apply that in our lives? In a difficult time like this, God is saying to us, keep pouring. Keep pouring your time. Keep pouring your love. Keep pouring your energy, your money, your gifts, your heart, your words. And as you pour whatever it is that you have, then God will multiply it. Okay? So pour it. Don't keep it. Don't say, well, this is all I had. Why will I give it away? Why will I share this? Right? So pour, obey whatever it is that God is saying. So that is the third point. Okay? Follow God's instruction. As you obey, then God is able to move in a great way in your life. Okay, smile a little bit. I'm going to my last point.
I
Okay. Um, Verse 5, I like to highlight this for a while. She went from him and shut the door, and then who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. I just love this picture. Now, The last point I want to share is this. If we want to see the helping hand of God in our lives in a time of need, um, I think it's so important that we ourselves become a vessel for God to fill.
Mm.
We want to be those that God can look to and say, I can trust you. I can I can do something with you. I can do a miracle out of your life because you are ready. You are a vessel of honor. You are a prepared vessel for me to use. Look to verse 6 again. It came to pass when the vessels were full that she said to her son, bring me another vessel. And he said to her, there's not another vessel. So the oil ceased. Now, the oil, sorry, sometimes God cannot do what He is able to do simply because there's not enough vessel available. That's why when a while ago when we sang the available worship song, I like that. It really confirmed the message that I want to share this morning. You know, we have to be that that song that we sang, that here I am, you can have it all, I'm available for you. That is so powerful. I tell you, that song is so powerful. What a song, what a prayer. You know, God cannot do what He's able to do oftentimes because there's not any vessel available for Him to use. And we want to be available for God. We want to raise our hand and say, yes, Lord, use me. I'm available. I want to be used by you. I want to prepare my life for you. Okay? The oil stopped flowing. I want to highlight this. I hope you remember this. The oil stopped flowing, not because there was no more supply of oil. No, the flow stopped because there was no more vessel to fill. This is very important. God has so much more for each one of us. Have you ever thought of that? God has so much more for us. He He has abundance. He abounds in every good things. There's so much more in terms of His plans, His wisdom, His grace. There's so much more in terms of His gifts, the gifts of His Spirit, His provision. There's so much more. But sometimes what hinders God is the availability of what I can say, people who are like vessels of honor that He can use. God has so much more for you. And so it's so important that we become like these vessels, empty vessels that are willing to be filled by God. Now, I want to say this. God, you can be that vessel. Think about that for a moment. You can be a vessel for God to fill. And all you have to do is to make yourself available to God. So again, um, when we look to 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 20 to 21, it says there, but in the great house there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood, clay, and clay, some for honor and some for dishonor. Now, this is the Apostle Paul speaking to Timothy. Timothy was a young man, and yet he had a heart for God, he loved God, he wanted to serve God, and this is one of the lessons that the Apostle Paul taught him. You know, in the house of God or in the kingdom of God, there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also wood and clay. Now, when you look to this verse, you would immediately see two categories, right? Vessels of honor and vessels of dishonor. I mean, vessels that you won't use for, special event, right? I see Joe holding a cup, right? What is that made of? What kind of vessel is that, right? That for sure is a good one, right? I mean, I I don't drink uh, hot chocolate, or my wife would not drink coffee using uh, a wooden a wooden vessel, or a clay. But no, we don't normally do that anymore, right? Maybe in the village in Myanmar, if you go up in the mountain or somewhere really isolated, maybe we could find some people using that. But no, even in our day-to-day life, we want to use good stuff. We want to use uh, good things, nice cup, nice spoon, nice plate, nice pillow, nice bed, nice computer. I mean, we tend to like the good things. And who put that desire in us? It is God who put that desire in us. God is not into crap, he's not into dirty things or bad stuff. God likes decent or good qualities. When God gave instruction to build his temple, he didn't use cheap materials, right? He used gold and silver and um, special wood and furniture. And so that's the heart of God, and God placed that desire in us to normally like good things. And that is the heart of God for us. He wants us to be a vessel that is likable, a vessel that is honorable, that He would like to use again and again. I don't know about you, but here in our home, I like, for example, right now it's morning here. Soon after I finish teaching, I would drink a hot chocolate or a hot milk or something like that. And there's always this mug or a cup that I always use. We have a lot of cups, but I would always use this cup because this particular cup, there's a piano uh, uh, drawing. How do you call it? There's a piano design around this cup, and it was my daughter who gave this on my birthday. And so, um, what I'm trying to say is this cup is so precious to me. It's special. I could not stand after I use this cup, I would wash it. I won't keep it dirty. I would wash it because I always want to use this cup. If I see other people using my cup, I will look at them and give them that look. You know what I mean? Like, you better drink that as fast as you can because that's my cup. Right? So, um, good vessels we tend to use often. Uh, Prepared vessels we tend to like them all the more, and we tend to use them more and more. And I think it's quite similar with God. He wants us to be a vessel that is prepared, that is clean, that is honorable, presentable, so that He could always come to us and say, I need you this time. I can use you this time. Let me do something again with you this time because we are available and we are prepared for Him. Now, think about this. A vessel that is dirty. Think of a vessel that is dirty and not prepared. Would you drink your coffee with it?
No.
No. Some people do, but we don't want to do that, right? No, we don't want to associate ourselves with dirty things, right? We don't want to do that. I mean, people who do associate themselves with dirty stuff, I think it's not correct. It's not normal, right? We normally like clean, and we thrive in clean environment. We find rest when the house is clean. When the office is clean, when your table is clean, you find joy and satisfaction when the environment or when your staff are actually clean. And so, how much more God, the God who is holy and the God who is um, the God of order, the God of godliness and holiness, how much more He would appreciate a person who is like a prepared and an honorable vessel before Him. The oil only stopped because there was no more vessel to fill. Okay, so again, to summarize what I shared, I hope you remember this. In time of need, if you want to see the hand of God do mighty things, first look to God. Seek Him. Cry out to Him like David. Um, Remember the promise in Jeremiah chapter 29 that if you would seek Him with all your heart, you will find God. You will find Him. And God will show you His plans and the great and mighty things that He want to do in your life. Secondly, use what is in your hand. Look to your house, look to your life, and see what God has blessed you with. Don't despise them. Don't ignore them. Use them. Thirdly, follow God's instruction in time of need. If you think that you are facing a difficulty, let me tell you, God is speaking to you. God is speaking to you. I heard this from Brian Houston, Pastor Brian Houston of Hillsong Church. He said, trials, they are like megaphone. When we are in a trial, God is like using a megaphone so close to our ear, trying to get our attention. And so when you are in a difficulty, whatever it is, they come in different shapes and form. God is speaking to us. And so we want to listen. God, what are you saying? Why did you allow COVID? Why did you allow these things to happen in me? I didn't expect it, or I didn't like it. I don't prefer it. But why did it happen, Lord? What do you want to say? Now, of course, many of us will not be able to take it. Like me, I can't take anymore this COVID. I'm tired of being at home for 8 months, right? Usually I travel, I go around, all around me. I should be in Taunji now. Or I should be in Michina at least. I want to go around and teach different places, but for the last 8 months I'm at home. I'm so broken. God, what are you trying to teach me this time? What are you trying to say? I can do what I used to do. What are you saying to me, Lord? So those time we need to hear from God. And when God speaks to us, we want to follow him. And that obedience to God will cause the hand of God to move in such a mighty way. And then lastly, we want to be a vessel of honor that God can use in time of need. I'm still hoping and praying that 2020 would not end like this. That God would, somehow in some way be able to turn the situation around before this year and do something beautiful. Might not be so beautiful in the natural eye, but beautiful in His eye, and do something beautiful in each of our lives as well. And so these are the lessons I'd like to share with you this morning. I felt like God spoke these things to me, and I want to share them to you. And I hope you find strength and encouragement as you ponder, as you read again the story of this woman who had very little in such a hopeless situation, and yet she learned these things, and God was able to perform such a mighty miracle. Just to end this, could you imagine what happened to this woman at the end of this situation, at the end of all of this? Right? They poured and poured and poured, and all the vessels they borrowed were all full. The oil did not stop. It only stopped because there was no more vessel. Imagine the house, her house, full of vessels filled with oil. You know what happened? Instantly that day, she became one of the most resource, one of the, if I can say perhaps, richest business woman in terms of oil. Just in a single day, from having little or almost nothing, she ended up having so much more, and she began to sell. She went out and ended up selling all of these things. And I believe she was not only able to pay their debts, but she had enough to sustain living, especially with her two sons. Think about that. God can do a mighty work in our lives in a difficult time. God is not limited with, our situation. And so this is something that I want to encourage you with. God can turn your situation around. God can turn it around. But then we want to be like this woman who would look to Him, use what we have, follow His instruction, and be like those vessels. God, fill me, fill me. Whatever it is, fill me. Fill me with your with your love. Fill me, Lord, with your patience. Fill me. I need more patience. Fill me, Lord, with your character, with your goodness, with your spirit. Fill me, Lord, with your nature. Whatever it is that you want to put in my life, so I can be released and be a blessing to the people around me. And so I hope you find something interesting enough to encourage you this morning. God bless you, everyone. And if you have a question, if there's anything that's not clear, I'm here to, be of service to you. God bless you.